Hello everyone and welcome to the third and final part of the Opus 18 Resurgence of Power set review. I am of course with Mr. Eureka, Jared. Jared, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's wrap this up, baby. Thanks again to Mysidia Gaming for the lovely thumbnails. Thanks to Jared for being here. And a really big shout out to the community at large. This was one of the best set reveals we've had because the Japanese site went up. The American site was updated first thing in the morning. Octagon was up right away. FFdex was up right. Like everything was, it was nice. It was so nice. In the past, it's like, well, you got to wait 2 weeks for this thing, 2 weeks for this thing. So thank you. Thank you to everyone who helped contribute to that.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
I hope this continues on into future sets too, especially when the competitive season picks back up. That would be really huge.
More of that, please, please. All right, let's talk about Light and Dark. There's no legends this time. I believe this is the first time with no legends. First, we have Elena from Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. There she is. And I don't... surely a card with this much text has got to have potential. Bart's Boko is obviously an early candidate because it's a 1 cost. I do love that she has Brave, so that way she can still attack and do any of her effects. The bump, the Zidane effect. Why? I don't want that to see that everywhere. That being said, she doesn't outright do anything so overwhelming that I'm like, well, you got to slot her in. And in general, Light and Dark have really fallen off in the face of these multi-elements because it's like, well, they're kind of super strong busted anyway, so why would I then want a card I can't discard for CP? So I don't think anything about her reads bad, but are you going to use up a slot for her?
Yeah, I'm mostly in that same boat. Obviously, this is another in the long line of FFB Light and Dark cards with way too much text on them for no reason. But this is nowhere near as busted as some of the previous members of that family. When you look at a card like this, you kind of have to evaluate the floor and the ceiling with it. Obviously, the ceiling for Elena is pretty good for a 1 CP card, especially. It's can draw you a card every turn. It still gets to attack because it has Brave. It can Zidane in the right situation. Now, looking at the floor, it's a pretty low commitment, 1 CP, 5k. So in a worst case, you're kind of just down, 1 CP. If it gets, Brynhildred or whatever, if it gets, kill if they actually pay somebody to kill it, basically if they're not getting it for free off of killing it with a backup or killing it with Brynhildred, then you're really not coming up behind. So I don't think it's a bad card by any means. I also don't think it's like a great use of your slots necessarily. Like this isn't doing anything that like contributes to a very specific game plan at any point. It's just kind of one of these generically all right cards that could potentially be useful. It's not particularly good at attacking your opponent. It's not particularly good at defending against anything. It's just kind of one of these like generically okay cards. So you might see one of it here and there, whatever. It's nice. It can be added back by zombie. It's a 1 CP, so it does have those kind of small synergies. It's especially really nice. I guess the one home that I really see for this deck is Bart's Boko, because it's a 1 CP, of course you do, So you Bart's, you Boko, you party attack, Materia comes out. You draw 1 off of, or you pay 1 for the Materia, this card comes out. The party attack connects, you draw 1 off of Boko. Now you get to party attack with the Materia and this card. And then you're going to get an attack with that. And because this one has Brave, you can still use the effects on your opponent's turn because it also has haste from the Bart. So that's where I really see this card being played most of the time. I don't really expect to see it in other normal decks. But it is a solid card, if nothing else, and I wouldn't like see this in a deck and be like, oh, this is just a horrible use of your slot, take that out. I just don't think it's not that bad. It's just like you gotta weigh it versus the other Light and Dark options. You have to think about like, well, should I be playing a Light and Dark card at all? Like obviously Mono Win probably shouldn't be playing Light and Dark cards for the most part, so we'll have to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know all the Final Fantasy VIII fans out there are sad because Squall never gets any cards. Well, don't worry. He's finally got a card, and it's this light one. This is another card, again. So, a dull freeze on a character, on attack and entry, there's nothing wrong with that. And this one even just has the nice little 1,000 power buff to boot. Nothing wrong with that. If this was an ice card, if this was everything was exactly the same, and it was an ice card, I'd love this. Like, oh my gosh, that's great. Combine it with the Laguna. But just the fact that it's light Well, yeah, it makes it so it can go anywhere, but again, it's okay. Well, now I've got to take the light tax. I don't know if the 2 cost reduction makes a difference for you. I don't know if you care about him more as a 2 versus a 4. I'm gonna try him in like the Cypher Raijin Fujin package,
Sure.
just cause why not? He gets cheaper, and again, nothing wrong with a generic dull freeze, and he'll always buff himself when he does it and the whole field. But there's also just nothing that's like, well, I gotta slot this in everywhere.
Right. Yeah, I don't like it. This is like it's not fine. I'm just like, well, he could have been a 4 CP 9K, or they could have like done. He could have been a 3 CP 8K, or like I think they could have done any number of things to kind of like give a card like this a chance to see the light of day, basically. Because I don't think it's happening. I mean, I guess maybe you're playing Fujin Raijin and you're whatever in your mono lightning deck or in your lightning water deck or whatever, and you're just like, well, I don't have anything better to do with my light and dark slot, so like I'll try it, but like. Is this card even going to be better than Kadaj in those decks? Probably not. You know, it's like I think this card is mostly dead on arrival, but it'll be cool in title, I guess. Yeah. So there's that. Yeah.
They're not short on squalls. Well, let's try another Final Fantasy VIII. We'll try the Ultimate Villain. This is Ultimisia, and whether this card ends up seeing play or not, it's very interesting. It does make you think and consider. Yes. You know, it taxes both players. I've been playing Magic recently. There's kind of a card like that too. It's like Liliana or someone, but she like taxes your opponent. And then on damage 5, it still doesn't take away your self-tax, but it increases the attacks on your opponent by 2. So everything that they do now costs 2 is like gross. My buddy built a deck kind of around this using stuff like warp, things that get around the cast requirement. It was interesting. Hell's Judgment the effect is really good, but it's a very expensive special, and if you're wanting to run multiple dark copies of this, I don't know. I wonder if this could have a home in something like Ice, where it says, not only am I going to keep your hand empty, everything you now draw costs more. So like if you literally have an empty hand, and I've frozen out your backups or whatever, and you draw 2, you can't even play a 2 cost because it costs too much. So maybe there she's got like a broken home of like, I'm just going to keep you from playing the game entirely. Get bent. What are you going to do about it? Beyond that, I don't know. Maybe there's a deck that can really abuse her where you don't care about the self cost. Maybe some cool control-y deck. I like the card. It's just too nebulous and out there for me to really say how I feel about it one way or the other. So I'm curious. I'm curious to see if it does anything.
Yeah, there is a lot of like unknowns about this card. We've never had a card that really does the same thing as this. I will say, so some of the things that I think this card does have going for it is, first of all, the set line is great. I mean, 4 CP 9K, just straight up good. It's not, you know, like normally I would have expected to see this on like a 5 CP 10K, because that's kind of Hobby Japan style, or like a 6 CP 10K or something like that, you know, like Neo X Death kind of stuff. 4 CP 9K, much better set line. It's much easier to play turn 1, much easier to just like put out there and start swinging with it. So I do like that a lot. I must confess, when I first saw this card, I was like, oh, this is a trap. This card is just totally garbage. You know, like it doesn't increase the cost of backups. Therefore, it doesn't even have like legs as an aggro card.
Yeah.
But after having it played against me a little bit, I kind of, I wouldn't say I've come fully around on it. I haven't like 180'd, and I think the card is great, but I do think that the card has some potential, particularly as a hard counter for like cast strategies, specifically against like mono wind, against wind ice, and like these kinds of decks. Making everything one more expensive is like taxing your opponent like 3 CP a turn, basically, if you think about it that way. And in that regard, I do think it has potential, because there's a lot of control or like mid-range control strategies out there, like mono water, like earth lightning and stuff like that, that are almost really good decks, but they just get blown away by mono wind or, you know, whatever, because they just don't have enough you can't interact with the mono wind strategy when they have chocobos and stuff like that, and also have all of your anti aggro cards that make those decks appealing in the first place. And I think one way that they could potentially get an advantage in this matchup is, you know, have all of your removal cards, you know, like your Ramus, your Hecaton chairs, that kind of stuff. Or if you're mono water, you have your Atomos or your Leviathan that cancels their auto and stuff like that. But also have Ultimisia on the board, because then they can't just like Chocobo and just like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care, it makes things much, much harder for the win player to actually accomplish. It doesn't just like one card them, but you use it in addition to the cards that you already had in your deck, your existing small forms of counterplay, and that makes it a little bit easier, I think. So I don't think it's like a hard counter I don't think it's a hard counter necessarily, but I do think that there is room for this card to kind of grow as like a 2-of in those kinds of decks that give you a chance against mono wind.
The win card struggling. You made my day, sir. Best card in the set. Moving on. All right. So finally we have Soul. I love this artwork. I don't know this character, but I love it. You would think a card with this many lines of text has surely got to be good. It's got a good stat line. 3 for 9 is great. And in particular, it triggers on both your turn and your opponent's turn. And his effects basically read, you don't lose combat. Whether you're shrinking their board, you're buffing your own board. Sounds great. The first thing I thought of trying him in was Knights, so that give all your Knights Brave. They can all attack, and then Ramza can do the Dull on their turn or afterwards, so you can get like double value. And in particular, there is a really interesting thing you can do. If you have cards that really need to enter the field or really scared of Amaterasu, you can just put out Soul or just go to combat, say, can't cast summons this turn. And now you've locked them out of Amaterasuing, and you just do everything in your main phase too. Maybe there's real potential there. That said, everything I just said, is it too pie in the sky? Is it too, well, yeah, that sounds great in theory, but in practice it just doesn't work out that way? I like this card. I'm going to try it. I'm hoping it's good, but its effects are kind of like mediocre enough or maybe situational enough. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets cut.
Yeah, it's a card that says you win combat. So in that regard, it's kind of got a pretty high floor, I think. Just as a 3CP 9K, sometimes there are decks that would just play that, especially if you're playing an aggro deck, if you're playing mono ice or ice lightning or whatever, and you just like jam this out and you're like, well, you thought you could attack or block or whatever, you can't anymore. You can't cast summons. There's no tomfoolery going around here. Mm-hmm. So I think in that regard, it is a card with a pretty high floor. It's always going to do what you want it to do. It's never going to fail. It's never going to get Amaterasu because it's 9K, So I think that the card is quite good. How often do I think that the 3 of 3 is going to trigger?
Yeah.
Not very often, probably. I just think that you probably shouldn't expect it to, and if it ever does, then hey, lucky, got him. That's about it.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, time for those juicy multi-elements, and we're starting off with the not samurai, known as Axstar, and 3 separate auto abilities. So if you Amaterasu him, you're only getting one of them, and he's all about the threes. 3 threes, and he plays the 3, and he dull freezes the 3. I did get to try this twice last night, and of course they all just went into damage, because why would I actually get to try them out? But when I did, he did feel very explosive. Haha, your whole board's dull, and mine are all 3s because that's what I built around it. And then on attack and entry, blasting something for the 3 times damage is just kind of absurd. And then getting to play the 3. I hurdied it in on my opponent's turn. I used the hurdy backup flash, and it's the most excited I've gotten about doing that. Like, I was like, yep, this is what I want to flash in on their turn. Doesn't matter, it's not 5. I'm bringing in 2 things and going, knock your board out, kill that, like, woo, explosive. That being said, if you really go in on the 3 theme, you do have to build your deck in kind of a weird way, because he only targets ice and fire. And when I was like looking through the forwards, I was like, yeah, there's not as actually many like great 3s I want to play anyway. Maybe you don't. I think I saw you playing him without other 3s, like just playing him with knights. So tell me about him. Did you have fun with him? How did he play for you?
I think this card is better the more you build around it. Like, the more 3s you have, the better it gets. Very plain and simple. Now, I think even if you like don't have many 3s, even if you're playing like knights or whatever, and you just like play this and you use it to cheat in another card as like your first and second forward, it's still just pretty good. Like, it's still just a 3CP 8K. Like, I was using it because I play like I play Soul, the crystal, eat a crystal and cheat something in. And I was using that to cheat in Zezat, and I was like, wait, but I always want to play Soul. What if I just played Axstar as like more souls, or just like, as another way to cheat these cards in,
Yeah.
where I could, Axstar and then Soul bring something in, and you just like play my entire hand and kill them. I've been playing this Fire Ice kind of strategy for a few opuses now, and having this Axstar as another way to like cheat in Zezat, cheat in your other 2-drops, and just like start hacking away at your opponent quickly. Even if he's your only 3-drop, he's still just pretty good at that job. I don't know if I'd play 3 of him in the deck after playing with it, but I'd definitely play 2 at least. And being Fire Ice, it has a pretty low floor. It's just been, a good card all around. I expect to see a lot of it in, like the Megisa strategy as well. It's good for that deck too. You get to cheat. You can't cast Forza, but you can bring him in off of in your hand from your hand off of Axstar. So like it gives you a way to do that too, even if you've drawn the Forza, and he's gonna deal damage that way. It looks like such a good card, and it's been playing so well for me, even at the total floor when I have no other 3s in the deck besides him. He's still been good. So I think this card is great.
I expect to see a lot from him, unlike Caius, who is one of the better villains we've gotten in Final Fantasy from the games themselves. Like, I really liked him in 13 too, but they hate this character. He always has this downside tied to him, and his on-attack effects are great. On-attack discard, fantastic. Double the damage to either a forward or your opponent directly, awesome. But man, you got to pitch out your whole hand. Like, if you're going really aggressive, awesome. You're right where you want to be anyway, so maybe you don't even care. But you've also just telegraphed, hey, I don't have Amaterasu in hand, and just like, it's just the worst penalty you could have on a card.
Yeah, it's a pretty bad penalty. Reminds us of like the Light Ace. I think this card is substantially better though. It's a 2 CP9K. You know what I mean? It is pretty. It has Brave. It has good attack triggers. I think the kinds of decks that want to play this card are really specific, very, very tiny. You have to play backup, so it doesn't really like work that well in Verstale. Obviously, it doesn't have the right cost. You have to discard your hand, so it has to be something that's like either cheating in a lot of cards or like going really, really fast. But I do think in those decks, it will be quite good. So I'm actually trying 2 of this in a brew that I have going on. Can't really say anything about it quite yet. It hasn't been particularly bad or particularly good. I played it as 2CP9K, but I was already winning. So like there's like that kind of, maybe it's a win more card. I'm not sure, but I think that the card is fine. I think it's probably gotten a little it's been reviewed a little too low for so far, but it's going to take some time to see if that kind of strategy is even viable in the first place before we start talking about playing this card. So
that's fair. Well, I know you're a 13 lover, and so we've got Snow next. Zidane called him on the phone, and he said, wait, you don't just keep the cards permanently removed and you can use them at any time? And he was like, well, no, I only booed. And he just hung up on him. Busted card and title. Fantastic there. Outside of that, I think he's a bit too specific to see use. You're a 13 guy. Got any love for him?
Yeah, this is... So, again, I talked a little bit when we were talking about Fang about, potentially an L3 Fire Ice 13 deck, and in that, if you're playing the Bahamut, if you're playing Caius, if you're playing Fang, Sarah's, and everything, he could potentially see use in L3 there. That's just like a given for me. It's very conditional in that one deck. Now, if we start like moving out of that and talking about, like in the future, standard, I don't think he's gonna get into standard now. I do think that there's a small shot. Maybe there is a way to inherently give your 13 characters haste or whatever, and it starts to be really appealing to play aggressive 13 strategies down the line, especially after the custom starter comes out in February. Could it see standard potential then? Maybe. It's got, like, drawing cards is never bad. We talked about that with Faceless, so I do think it is a powerful card. I'm just, I'm a little sad that it doesn't seem to be quite there for standard right now.
Yeah, I feel you on that one. Power levels are all over the place, too, with these cards. I know. So next we have Zondi with this beautiful full art. And this is a card, I wonder if I'm overthinking it, because I'm trying to think, okay, so he's like a board wipe, right? Where is this play that you've lost a bunch of stuff on your side, so now you like counter with this board wipe? But maybe he doesn't need that. Maybe it's, in combat they blocked a guy or that a burst killed something. And so then he just comes down as a 4 cost that says, hey, 9k to something, delete a forward. That's not bad, right? On its own. He's got the action ability I think you're only going to ever use if you're desperate and it's going to keep you alive because you don't want to have to burn up all your backups. So he's cool. I wonder if, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is one I really need to play to grasp how good he is or isn't.
I think it just comes down to, are you playing Fire Earth or not? Because if you aren't, then, obviously you're not going to go out of your way to play this kind of card. If you are playing Fire Earth, you're probably going to have at least one, even if you don't play around the top ability at all, just having the pressure by it existing in your break zone at all. That's something that's useful. And, Alex said the same thing in his review, just having this extra gimmick that your opponent has to think about every turn, for so many turns. That is something that, it is useful in these kinds of games. In terms of the top card, it is it's noticeable that it triggers for characters, so this works with monsters too. So my immediate thought here is that, well, I want to play this with goblins, because if I play goblins, then, I sack off 3 goblins in a turn, play Zandy, and I just get to nuke the entire board, basically. It's all gone, And I think it is potentially quite good in that kind of strategy. There's this package that we've seen kind of with Fire X decks that have kind of been tier 2-ish up in since the Goblin has been released, where it's you play a Princess Goblin backup, one of the 2 CP Goblin, one of the Haste Goblin, and then 3 of the Goblin, the 1 CP Goblin that searches more Goblins and you can stack them off. I could easily see that kind of package being slotted into a Fire Earth deck. The new Bosch is quite appealing too. And the other thing that is really good about the Goblins is that it's an easy way to get a bunch of fire characters on the board for Hien. So I could see the Goblin package, Zandy, Bosch, Cyan, Hien, and then the Samurai backups. And because you have Samurai backups with the Cyan, it's going to give you crystals as well, so you can play, Bahamut and Robel Akbel. Great crystal card that, everybody's going to appreciate. So I can see this, kind of cookie-cutter Fire Earth deck, 30 cards-ish about, probably, that are going to be, determined for you. You're not going to skip Amaterasu and Brynhilde, these very powerful cards, But, yeah, I can see this kind of, cookie-cutter Fire Earth deck, 30 cards-ish that are already decided for you, and then what are we doing with the extra 20 cards? That one I'm not sure about. The other thing is, I do think that Soiree could potentially get a lot of leverage out of just playing one of this, being able to break all of their backups as a way to get back into the game. Obviously, they don't want to break all their backups, but one of them is Thordan, so if they break the Thordan, they're going to get to draw a card too, and it's better than losing the game sometimes. So if they're going for game, they know that it's going to be game, or they're going to lose. Just having this one card potential out, sacking it off by sacking backups. Amber Elvis is going to make this live, and Fire Earth is already a color combination that we wanted to have in the deck anyways. So I expect to see the card pop up in competitive. I don't know if the Fire Earth deck is really well suited to beating Wind and stuff like that, but if it is, then that is definitely on the table, and we'll definitely go at least one of in there, I think. I'm not sure if this is better than Bosch and Soiree is getting pretty tight on slots, but it could show up there too.
Yeah. No, great point and great insight. Speaking of Bosch, he looks so happy and smug here. He's like, yeah, it took 18 opuses, but I've got a card that's just generically good. And I thought that when I first saw this, I was almost bored by it, because I was like, oh, well, that's just generically good across the board. One of those cards that he could be missing his last 2 damage triggers, and he'd still be absolutely great and playable. Those are just icing on the cake. My friend described a funny scenario. He's like, man, could you imagine playing this in Avalanche? Turn 1, the damage you hit is Elfie. So it's like, oh, well, don't mind if I do. So Elfie goes, gets me the Avalanche. He goes and gets me the thing. It's just generic. Go get whatever the best card is for your situation. I love it on turn 1 when you have those bad hands of I didn't draw any backups. Oh, but I drew Bosch. I'll just go get my backup. It's just generically strong, and if you happen to get to the other damage effects, he's just gonna keep giving you even more. Card's ridiculous.
Yep. Suspiciously a lot like a brand, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say that?
Right?
Suspicious, isn't it? Yes. Generically good. Good for Avalanche. Good for Soiree. I think it good enough to just kind of see play. It comes in off of Fran. We'll talk about Fran in a little bit, but it comes in off of Fran too. Good there. Yeah, I just think if you can play this card in your deck, it's just like automatically 2 or 3 of it. You know, whatever fits your slots, whatever you're into at the time, go for that. Great card. Great damage triggers. Damage 5, you're probably not playing it for that, but if it comes up, obviously you start swinging and hitting things for as an 8K Brave, just swing, deal 8K. If you ever get to that point, you're probably winning so far anyways that's not really where you're gonna play the card, but that is where it is.
Yeah. So his lesser form is Leon. If you would like to take the damage with none of the benefits, Leon is the card for you. Kind of like Caius, this card is. They're like, well, get it because he's a traitor in the game for a tiny part, so he's always got to do something to hurt you. I don't know where you would play this. We have so many good self damage options at this point too. Like, why? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean. I saw somebody playing, so I've seen this slotted in one list so far, and that was a WAF deck. So if you play the new Seraphy and you're playing Fire Earth, then you want to play 2 CP characters, and this card deals you damage, and so dealing yourself damage gets the Mira online faster. So like, yeah, there's something to be said here for like playing Bosch and Leon in the same deck to deal yourself more damage so that Mira gets online faster and these kinds of things. But yeah, it's not a particularly standout card. It's just the WAF deck, and maybe potentially seeing Leon, Bosch, and Seraphy and Mira in all in the same deck that you would potentially see this card this card would see play.
Yeah. Well, moving on to Icewind. Here we have Sid Hayes. So there's one thing I like about this card, and that's the art. It's gorgeous. Let me recant to you my first experience playing against this, where my opponent played it, and then said, okay, I'm going to cast this Kusith for free. And I was like, for free? What? And I read it. The next card is reduced by 2. And know that it can't become 0. It can become 0. So he just played Kusith for... Oh, by the way, that was the second cast. Atomos. Da-da-da. And then he went to combat, and then he just froze my backups, and I was like, what the hell, man? Like, what is it? And then if you cast 3, and guess what that means? Lock is now 2. So he said, by the way, mind if I just kill your entire board with Dull Freezes? And I was like, well, but I want to play the game too. And Sid Hayes was like, no, you're not playing the game. I love this art, but dude, this card can just, oh my God, I hate it. I hate it because it's fantastic. And it's so busted. Like, oh, please go.
Not so hot take here. Best card of the set. Not even close to me. This card is like SSS tier god card. And my first experience playing with this card was like, I played Icewind and I had the classic. I was like, oh yeah, I have like 1 backup in my hand, right? Mm-hmm. And it was like a Nagmalata. So I was like, okay, well, at least it's Nagmalata. Discard 2, play a 3 CP backup for 4. Feels bad, man. Add Adamus to my hand. No other backups, just like my opponent plays a backup, passes back to me, and I'm like, oh, I drew Althea. It's like, fine, I'll just Althea and I'll pass the turn. And I was like, wait, I'll play Adamos, play Sid Hayes, activate a backup, play Althea for 1, activate my backup, and I was like, played like 6 cards, Lusoed my opponent, killed his entire board, drew a card, and like, I was like, this card is broken. Like, I had a horrible start, and yet my turn 3 was like so good that I just like didn't even realize I froze my opponent's backups, didn't even have to lock. Like, this card is insane. It feels like every time I play this, it feels like I'm time walking my opponent. Like they get to draw cards for their turn and play their turn, but they don't get their backups. Like, you never get to have your backups anymore. Or like, if you're dying, you don't get to have your forwards. Yeah. You don't get to attack this turn. This card feels so unfair. I
can't believe it has the continued value that every attack phase. I was just like,
I could believe that like on the first turn that it came in, it was supposed to do this, and it was never supposed to do it again. But like, I just like, I don't know what to say. Like, the second time that I played this card, I played Norstallin and I searched for Uke, and then I played Althea Uke, and then on turn 3, I was like, just Atomos Sid Hayes lock, and my opponent has no backups, and I just killed my opponent, got a card from my opponent's hand, and I can ulti and do it all again next turn. It's like, it feels so stupid because, yeah, I don't know, man.
It's the definition of that meme from The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Like, stop, he's already dead.
Yeah, he's already dead. Yeah, it feels so stupid that after 2 casts, you can play lock for 2. That it just like it feels so wrong, and like it feels so wrong that it can become 0. Like I've done things where I like tap out and it looks like I'm like done casting for the turn, but I play Sid Hayes and then I get to play Pavlov for 0, and then I play Pavlov for 0 and reactivate backups, and I was like, this is so dumb. Like I have no idea what they were thinking with this card. I want to understand, but I've played like half a dozen games off of Ice Wind, and it's just like not even close most of the time. Like it just feels like so far above everything else that I'm playing. My opponent never gets to play the game, or if they, the only game that I've lost is when my opponent like turn 1 Ultimisiad and I Typhon it, and they turn 2 Ultimisiad. That's like the only time I've ever lost. It's like, yeah, and Icewind even got another good card. We're gonna get to in a second. Yeah, just like, I think this card really solidifies the best cast deck is probably Icewind at this point, though. The only thing that I can say is like, if people start coming at you like so hot that you have to just like, you have to be able to kill something, then there's a chance we play like Firewind or Earthwind with the Noctis. But if not, this is just far and away. I think this is miles better than Mono Wind at this point with this card.
Get your Amaterasu.
I'm exasperated.
You're gonna need them.
Yeah.
You're gonna need them.
Yeah.
Well, and so talking to the next card, this was my spoiler. This is Maria, and I was so hyped for this when I first saw it. And now it like kind of just seems like junk comparatively. Again, some people I've seen be in the camp, doesn't have an entry effect, dismiss, gone. But I think this is. It kind of reminds me, and it's my spoiler, so please tell me if I'm being biased here. It kind of reminds me of Opus 9 Porum in the sense that you really don't want this to die. Like, could you imagine if this blocks you in combat? Block, Bismarck the board down, she dies, reactivate everything, I can Fiona search, Bismarck you again. Or, I don't think people properly understand how bad a Zidane effect is going to feel on your combat phase. By the way, you're in the middle of combat, I'm going to rip that best card you have out of your hand. So, but as you pointed out, though, Icewind has so many great things it can do. Maybe you don't even need this for slots, but okay, I'm biased because it's my spoiler. What do you think of it?
I think that the Icewind deck is so good, you can kind of get away with like whatever you want at this point. Like, I think that if you want to play this card, go for it. It's gonna be good. Like it is good. It's a good card. I don't know if it's the 100% optimal best use of your slots. That's my like. You could be playing Riku. You could be playing like I've cut Baralai at this point. I think Baralai sucks now. Like compared to like other stuff. So like for cutting Baralai, maybe this card doesn't see play, but maybe it does. You know, I do think that the Zidane effect on your opponent's turn is very powerful. I definitely agree. You know, who knows? This is probably the Icewind card I think is the least powerful of the bunch, but it's still better than the other 2 CPs that we've seen in the multi-element slot by a country mile. And it's like it's such a good comment too. Yeah, I don't know.
She's got a great M name. Let's get the other M name. Melvin. Fun little full art. Warp only for 1 turn, although you do have to pay 2 elements, so maybe that. Right. But even then, like, it's an on-stat body, 4 cost 8k, so I don't think you have any issue playing this. And then, of course, he gives you the old switcheroo. You get 2 backups back while they lose 2, so he's essentially only 2. And then for some reason, he just doesn't ever die. There's no limit to how quickly he can come back. Like, what? Like, I mean, I could kind of understand that on Aerith, because Aerith, 1, it was 3 turns, and 2, it was just a power bump. Why? I don't know why a card with an entry effect is allowed to just forever. You cannot get rid of this card unless you remove it entirely. Like, why? Why did I swear? Did it need this? Please go ahead.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack with this card, but I think why is a really great question. I can't answer that one, so I'm going to go ahead and tackle some of the other ones.
Please.
So Warp 1, I think they intended this to be like, okay, when we played it with Warp 2, it felt like a really long time for this to get active because you had to pay 2 elements So I kind of get that, why they did Warp 1 instead. That being said, it probably should have been Warp 2 anyways. It probably should have been. I will say that when this does come in off of Warp, you don't really get value off of the active trigger because it's happening at like the very start of your turn.
Mm-hmm.
So when you activate your own backups, it's not actually doing much. Although there is this little known card called Chocolate that does get a free counter basically when you do it. So there is that as well. I will say though, I probably warp this 30% of the time. I think most of the time that I play it, I'm just playing it normally because it gets the backups back immediately. So it's kind of the same in terms of CP, but it just kind of feels better. It counts as a cast. So I think this is mostly a card that you play normally, and then sometimes when you don't have anything else to do, you can warp it in, and it's not a big deal. Freezing more of your opponent's backups for some reason, I don't know. I don't know why Sid Hayes gets the freeze backups, Locke gets the freeze backups, and Velvet. It just feels like my opponent never gets to use their backups at this point. Yeah. Like they're not allowed to. So the card is quite good. I don't know why it doesn't die. It should have been 3 counters, I think. I don't really get it. I think it's too good at, like, between Sid Hayes and this card, Icewind is suddenly really good at blocking. Like they don't, and stopping combat damage. Like I think Icewind is still gonna struggle against like Rydia kind of deck, kind of like Mono Wind struggles against Rydia, where you really only have like Typhon to kill the Rydia and Palom and Porum and stuff like that. But in terms of just decks that are coming to, to kill you, I don't actually think that Icewind is even bad against those decks anymore, because you have this Sid Hayes, you have Melvin to clean out their resources, you have Locke to tie down their board. You can, between Melvin and Sid Hayes, you can say like, okay, you lose 2 CP and you can't attack me with 2 4s that you've already paid for, like every turn for no reason. Like it's so crazy.
And he's not like a 5k blocker like Aerith, where she was kind of like, he's an 8k, so he can kill something. He's like, oh, don't worry, I'll be back. Old Terminator.
Yeah, and when you have Bismarck out, you can 8k and trade in and do you can trade with 10ks. It's just so it's crazy. This card is more of like I think you can play as many of this as you want. I would probably never play 3 at this point. I think this is more of a 0, 1, or 2. I want to play 2 for now because I think it's good enough at casting. It's not quite as good as like Rosad creating CP or Cerberus at creating CP. So if you really need more cast stuff, then you probably won't focus on this. But just as a generic good card, it still works with your casting strategies, and it's just good enough that I think you're probably going to play 2 of it. I wouldn't be surprised if builds without it were still really good. I wouldn't be surprised if builds only playing like 1 or whatever were still really good. But I think that you'll probably end up playing 2 most of the time.
Icewind, baby. Let's get the hell away from it, please. And then they'll go there because we're going to get Sephiroth in here. The card that gave every Ice Lightning player cheers and hopes, because as we said back in the Al Cid Zero Miss days, what is it missing? It's got plenty of ways to push you out of the way, but it doesn't have removal. Well, Sephiroth says, baby, I'm coming for removal. I think back attack 100% makes the difference between this card being, it's fine, versus, it's everything you want, because normally you've got to wait. Well, I got to wait for them to attack me, and then on my turn, it's like, nope. The moment that thing goes dull, boom, and then he's ready for his 2 great on attack triggers. Discard on attack is fantastic, and he can break 2 costs like Rydia, like Pound, like Porum, and they don't have to be dull, and that is huge because that's what I would have expected. Oh, but they also have to be dull. Nope. I feel like he's just everything Ice Lightning could want, and I can't really see any flaws with him. I had an opponent literally they were going second. I turn 1, put down my backup. He's like, well, before he pass Sephiroth, he didn't even have a target for it, but he's like, I don't care. I'm just going to start making you discard right away. So he's pretty gross.
Yeah, I think having an attack trigger and having back attack is really what makes this card like really shine. I think if it was just, like back attack with the top effect, we'd be like, it's pretty good. Like it's decent. You're going to play it in the Ice Lightning deck. I think with the attack trigger here, it's like, there were so many times, you play against Palom, Porum, Rydia, or whatever, and they just go like Rydia, Palom, or like Rydia, Porum, or whatever, and you're just like, oh, well, I lost. And it's like, now it's like, okay, well, I'll attack with the Porum, and you're like, surprise! Yeah. It's like, Porum's dead, and I'm coming for the Rydia. It's like, it's that kind of thing. I think that, this card is great. I think if Ice Lightning is ever going to be good, this is like the kind of stuff that it needs to get. I don't know if we have everything to make that deck really, really strong, but this is definitely a 3-of, like slam it in whenever you can. I would not be surprised if other decks, they like kind of stretched to fit this card into it. It's really like Alcid is a powerful card, Zeramis is a powerful card, and this card is just as powerful as those two.
Yeah.
So expect to see that going forward.
Well, if you want more Ice Lightning, let's get the card that made me so mad when I saw it, because I just said, forgive the little mini rant. I was like, are you kidding me? We have another multi-element lightning, like in the same. Why? Why is that? I have nothing against this character. I like this character. I've played all 3 of the games. Why? She gets 2 multi-element cards in the same set. I don't understand, man. I just don't understand. I guess they really wanted you to play Mono Lightning 13 title. It's not like she's got a starter set coming. Like, God, they love Lightning. Anyway, the card itself is fine. She has 3 really good effects when she attacks, and she has haste, so she can go in right away. It was like, well, here's even more removal again. You've got the dull. You can just push it out of the way. You've got the dull break. Like, I need you to talk about it, because all I see is like more Lightning.
Yeah. There isn't a whole lot to say for this card other than like the top 2 effects. They work together, so you can just like pay 3 and break anything basically, as long as your opponent isn't interacting with that in any way. It's a very fine card. It's not as good as the other like Ice Lightning cards like Alcid. So in my opinion, Alcid, Zeramis, and Sephiroth are like some of the best multi-element cards that are in the game. They just really haven't found their home where they just came out, like Sephiroth just came out.
Mm-hmm.
But this card is not quite as it's a great card, not quite as good as those, and so I wouldn't be surprised to see it like put on the back burner, especially towards the middle and end of the set when the lists are getting really tight and really refined, and you have to tech for whatever the existing decks are. It's not quite as powerful as those other ones. So I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe it's 1, maybe it's 2, maybe you don't need to play it at all. But yeah, it's just a fine card. I don't actually think the discard effect is very good. It is nice that it has it, so it doesn't have to attack to do something. I don't think it's quite as powerful as some people are kind of leading on about it, I think. The other thing about this card is this is the last copy of card name Lightning that we needed to make 50 card Lightning title.
It's the dream has become a reality. When with the new Ice Lightning cards, they were having a soiree, a get-together, a party, a box social, and they were all celebrating, and Laguna came in and was like, hey, I'm here too, and everyone was like, oh my God, who invited this guy? He just seems so lame in comparison. Like, his stat line is on curve, but it's just like, okay, but he's still restricted to active, 5k to inactive. Like, he feels like, well, it's a common, so he has to have common effects. That's what I have to say about
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think this card could have been instantly good if they just added one more mode that said your opponent discards a card, and all of a sudden the card's really good. Like, we would actually be excited to play it. Or, they could have erased, or it could have just been the only effect. We didn't need the other effects, I don't think, at all. And it would have been really good, and we would have been excited to play it. This one, nah, not happening, I don't think. It's a little too bad.
Yep. Just speaking of bad, my least favorite art in the set, this is Chelinka.
This is great.
I looked at it side by side with the Opus 7 Chelinka because I love that art, and I was just like, this can't be the same character. Like, no, she's so cute and lovely. And I mean, it's hey, I'll give it this. It stands out. When I think of art from the set, I think of frickin' Chelinka. Other than that, it's just a strict upgrade over Prish in the sense that it's not limited to monster. Granted, I don't know how many monsters are really above like 3 costs these days. I guess the two-headed dragon is. Technically, you lose the modal of being brave, but usually people played Prish for the break anyway. So if you're trying to kill monsters, Chelinka and your Earth win. She seems like a way to go.
Yeah, I think so. Chelinka can hit the twin-headed or scale toad kind of cards. It's all kind of something you don't want to think about, like what cost monsters are being played. So I think you'll probably just play this over the Prish. It's just kind of an upgrade, but
yeah. All right, next we have Tifa. This is just okay. I don't know. I kind of find 5, so you have to pay it on entry, so you pay 5 total to do a one-time fight effect. It's designed so that Tifa's always going to win because she's going to take less damage, but someone was actually comparing this to the Prish Legend from last set. And they're like, well, but that one can do it repeatedly, and if you consider you discard a card to make that 5 anyway, it's still an 8. Like, I don't know. And the special is a special. Like, that's not really going to come up, so I just feel like Earthwind can do so many better things on this card, especially with Noctis around now.
Yeah, it's very fair. The only thing that I think that this has going for it is because it's a multi-element, and in the current Earth Wind deck is like Tilica plus Noctis, you can kind of get like a fourth emergency Noctis, and it still discards for win CP, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So it might just be like just barely good enough to see it play as like one copy in like that deck, and I can't really think of anything else that is going to play it.
Yeah. Well, moving on, we have a legend. This is Fran and Jira. There are two things I absolutely love about this card. But that's it. Because whoever came up with this card, bonk them with the naughty stick, put them in horny jail, throw them in the corner, because this card is so busted. I do not know what they were thinking having this be on entry and on attack. My opponent, who used this, in one turn, went from 2 backups to 5 by doing Vaughn, played Fran played Balthier, who then played Pinello, and then Balthier dulled to give her haste, so she instantly went in and played like Mjörn or Yote, whichever the 4-cost one was. Right. And I was just like, and she's brave and 1,000. Like, I get that she's Earth. I get it. Well, technically she's off color, but my opponent, between the Moogle that's wind and can tap for Earth, a Tyro, like, they had 0 issue, and on entry it would be strong. Any 12 character of 4-cost, he brought in Gabrant later, but on attack too, in a tribe that can immediately give it haste, I was just like, what do they think? Like, this card is everything I hate about what Final Fantasy has become, in the sense of like, let's just shit out a bunch of forwards. I had a board of nothing. Here's 5 forwards. Now that die. Oh, I hate this card so much. Please go ahead.
Yeah, the ceiling on this card is so insanely high. The only problems that I have with this card is I understand, you know, it does have a really big ceiling. It's got great targets. There's the new kites, you know, there's Gabrant, there's Bosch, there's all of our Sky Pirate friends, you know, you get your Balthier, and their Balthier is going to buffer and give her haste and stuff like that. Great. All sorts of things to do. And Yote, who's going to search for her as well. Great. Now, like, how do I actually like build a deck with this card is really the question. And I don't think you can do like Wind, Water, Pirates, Splash Earth. I don't think that works. I think you have to play like a hard 3-color deck, and I think that's the price you pay. Like, whatever comes with that, that's what you got to do. Now, like, where am I with this card after that? I don't know. Like, obviously, I'm going to like get totally destroyed by this card when it's operating at its full potential, and my opponent is doing whatever they want. But I'm not confident that like I could build a deck that like does that consistently over 6 Swiss rounds, you know? And I'm kind of, I've mixed feelings about this card. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I'm really looking forward to seeing what some creative deck builders will do with it. I am interested in probably building with it later in the set, once we kind of like know what we're building for a little bit. Maybe, you know, like a month into the set, kind of have an idea about how to best use this card and get a lot of value out of it very quickly. But yeah, I'm not super on board with it right now. I just need more time. It needs more time in the oven to kind of get into that 30 or 45, like 30 to 40 cards that I'm like comfortable with, and just figuring out those last 10. I'm not even to there yet. So
I think that's another reason I hate it, is because kind of what you said. I will never be able to take advantage of it like that, because I won't get the colors, I won't see the characters. But this guy I play against, he's just smooth as butter for him. Oh, look, every single time. So it's like, it wouldn't even work for me if I tried it. Okay. Next card is actually quite interesting. This is Vanille. At first, I almost just dismissed it because I was like, oh, this just looks like a common they threw in there. And then I read its effect, and I thought about it. I was like, wow, this is actually quite nice protection that, you know, you can use it immediately because it doesn't have the dull symbol. And just, hey, any auto ability, and it doesn't have to be a choosing one. Like, you could put down Shantoto. All right, well, it's going to cost you 2 extra, and it doesn't cost me anything to do that. And then if they were to target her and she's going to die, oh, okay, no big deal. I'll go get that back from my breaks.
Exactly,
the only thing I can honestly see why you wouldn't even use her is slots, but I was even wondering, like, do you use it with Ultimecia somehow? Hey, now everything you pay costs extra, and I can just cancel it anyway. Like, I think this has a lot of potential.
Yeah, I am cautiously optimistic about this card. I think a lot of people said it was pack filler, and I was like, I don't think it's pack filler. It's a little bit better than that. I think you have, when I look at this card and I think about how it's playing out, it's like, well, it's going to be really annoying. And if you're not willing, you have 1 turn. you have one turn to kill it before it's just immune to Brynhildr and all of that, because they can just sack it off whenever they want. So you get one turn, and then after that, it's going to be kind of a pain to really deal with once it's on the board. And paying 2, it doesn't sound like a lot, but a lot of decks, they only activate one auto ability per turn. They're not, storming off, they're not doing whatever. And so that means every auto ability that they cast is going to cost 2 more. And when you think about it like that, it is a lot more expensive than it seems on first glance. So I'm excited to play with the card. I don't know that it's going to be like super broken or anything, but it just seems like a good use of the slot. Seems like it pairs well with a lot of the other things that Earth Lightning is trying to do in the first place. Just make it slow down the game, make it difficult for your opponent to interact with what you're doing. So yeah, I'm excited for this.
Let's check out her legend counterpart. This is Sonnen, one of the first cards we actually saw for this season. He's an EX burst, which is quite nice. He does have an alternative cost. The only part I really like about that is they don't have to be active. So if you legit only have Sonnen in hand and you're all tapped out, you can still sack those in an emergency if you need to bring him down. I do like him for his specificity of taking on something like Rydia, which is immune to damage, so he can just say, hey, -5 power, she's done. Yes. Beyond that, I don't know, he feels very fair to me. Like, if he was a ninja, not that ninjas really plays Earth either, but I don't know. Yeah, all his lines of text are good, but he just feels very fair. Like, it's hard for me to see anything busted he's doing.
Yeah, I think that the middle line of text is kind of a bait. It's a nice emergency thing to be able to do, to sack your 2 backups, to bring it in. Better than losing the game.
Yeah.
That's I think that's kind of the motto that they have going here. But I think most of the time, if you're putting this in your deck, you have to want it on the merit of casting it alone. And I think in that sense, it's more of like there's not really an Earth Lightning deck that is really going to be happy to play this as far as I know. Maybe, the Earth Multicolor deck is more happy to play this just because, it helps turn on, Billy Bob, you get to draw a card, or you get a card back with Rydia, or, it's stuff like that. Could be okay. I mostly agree. It is quite fair, and I'm not a fan of fair cards. I mostly think that unfair cards is a better place to be when you're playing competitive games, so...
when I think of Final Fantasy VII, I think of Sid Highwind, one of my favorite characters. Great moment in Rocket Town, and him shaking his head and saying, Shara, you're going to make a murderer out of me. Like, I've got to cancel my dream. He has not gotten a great card. But you know who it is? Frickin' Billy Bob. Like, there's still no good Sid Highwind. Kate Sith still doesn't have, other than the backup. Like, there's so many 7 characters. Hojo's underrepresented. But hey, we finally got Billy Bob. All that aside, you kind of mentioned him earlier with the Avalanche. He's just kind of, your generic. He enters, gets you back any forward you want. Pretty solid. Nothing fancy about it, but it does exactly what you want it to do.
Yeah.
And he's an Avalanche operative, if that matters.
Why? So why? In my opinion, it's like, I don't know why for the character. I don't know why for the Avalanche operative like this either. It's like, so we have Barrett. Barrett can get any Avalanche operative from your grave. Billy Bob can get any forward from your grave. So now we just have this infinite loop of Billy Bobs and Barretts. And I think they thought like, hey, but it's going to be a pretty big cost to play Lightning CP. But the thing is, once there's 2 Billy Bobs in the break zone, you could just Barrett and get back the Lightning CP so that you always have Lightning CP. So yeah, I don't know. I think that this was a mistake. They just should not have done this. I don't know why they did. I don't know why it's going to get haste for free. I don't know why it has 8k power. Like,
it can trigger the party attacks, yeah.
Yes, it can trigger the party attack. I just hate it. I hate everything about it. I would have been fine with it if it was a mono lightning card, because it's an Earth Lightning card. I actually think it's just like 1,000 times like worse. So yeah, I mean, I'll play it in the Riku deck too. If I make the multicolor Riku, it's obviously a slam dunk in that deck. But yeah, I think that this is going to be really annoying. I think people are saying like, oh yeah, but it's part lightning, so it's not going to fit into Avalanche. But I think they're just going to play it in Avalanche anyways. Yeah. You're going to cheat it out by discarding another copy of itself, or you're going to use the lightning Moogle, or you can Tyro it even. It's just like, I hate it. I don't know why we needed to give Avalanche operatives all of this like long-term support, but for some reason they did, and now we're stuck in Avalanche hell. So.
I hope I get to beat someone with this, like as the final party, and I'm going to lean across the table and be like, you just got beat by Billy Bob, boy. Oh, goodness. All right, so let's get some sweet Mysidia art here with the Onion Knight. the choose a damage forward, break it. Man, that was a really big thing back when I started back in Opus 8. You saw stuff like Cactar, Sid Orlando decks. I feel like that hasn't really been around much these days. Maybe there just haven't been good enough cards to play it. And then, of course, he's got the bounce. He's got kind of your usual Onion Knight shenanigans. They've been trying to make Onion Knights for a thing for a while. I don't know if the issue is that they don't have enough Onion Knights. It might be more that they're all called Onion Knights. So I'm not really sure how to evaluate this guy. He is also a Warrior of Light. Maybe that comes up somewhere, but he's definitely the least excited I am about some of these multi-elements.
Yeah, I think I was kind of excited for this card when it was first spoiled. I was like, oh man, it's an 8K, like look, it's so good. And then what I didn't realize, because we didn't have all the information at the time, is that all of the multi-elements are just like 1K buffer for some reason. So like Billy Bob is an 8K too. It's like, oh well, maybe it just kind of like lost some of its value by getting bigger right there. And Chizzy damage forward, not really a thing that happens anymore. I mean, it could be. There's no reason it couldn't be. It's just like you can do the same thing. The card pool is so much bigger that you can do the same thing for better now most of the time. You don't have to go out of your way to make these kind of janky removals just because they're CP efficient. There's already CP efficient removal if you just pick the right ones and put them in your deck a lot of the time. So yeah, I'm not really sold on that. The bottom text is really what kind of does it for me, is this pay 1 to search out a card named Onion Knight and play it to the field. That has a lot of like long-term implications on how good and how big Onion Knights could ever possibly be. Like it seems unlikely that they're just gonna make like a 7-drop like Onion Knight ever now, right? Like it's just not gonna happen. It's just gonna get cheated out by this, So there's that. Is this card actually gonna see play? Probably not, is the unfortunate truth. Even with the Warrior of Light job, even with, all of this other synergy going on, it's just kind of not good enough, I think, to see play outside of title.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go to something that will absolutely see play in Water Lightning, maybe other places. Right. Here is the Lightning Legend. Got spoiled by a game website. I thought this was the only Lightning we were getting. No, lucky us, we got a second one. And this card, I mean, you could remove the action ability. If it just had its entry effect, I think it's incredible. Haste, enters, dulls something out of the way, and draws you a card, and then it can just attack immediately. Like, what? And then, for some reason, it has this action ability that is chained by the fact that you do have to have an Odin at least, but I don't think that's a small cost that you can then immediately play her onto the field. She is active, so she'll once again dull, go out of the way. Technically, she does have the downside that they do have to have a target, so you can't just like play her out on an empty field for a draw haste. I don't know. I struggle to see that as a downside, that like, well, my opponent's not playing any forwards. Okay, well, I guess I'm just killing you with everything else I've got then. Like, a card just reads insanely good.
Yep, I think this card is like totally cracked. I'm not a lightning aficionado, and especially not a water lightning aficionado, so I'm not going to be the one who really makes this card shine and brings it to its fullest potential, but it's going to be great when it is. Not a whole lot to say about it.
All right. So moving on to one that won't be so great. Here's Lillicet. I mean, it's so hard not to compare it to other Lillicet. Technically, yeah, this gets around. Like you said, good Rydia counter, doesn't have protection, immediately puts in the break zone, kind of like the Renoa. But just, I mean, if you're playing anything with Lillicet, I don't know. Is that not fair? Like, because obviously this serves a very different purpose, but that Lillicet is what makes dancers work. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah. And I think my biggest gripe with this is like you could just play Thunder Drake. Like it's just like the same. It's like this one's pack filler for me. I don't like it at all.
Yep, great point. Well, here's one that I know a lot of people are excited about. This is Arciella, Red Mage. She just got a great card in the last set. Here she is again. This art really cracks me up too. It's like I don't know if she got interrupted eating her cake, where she looks like, oh, hello, I didn't see you come in there. When I first read it, I thought, well, I don't know, how possible is that to get both? But there's a lot of water fire cards that I think you're happy to put in a deck together, especially if you're trying Knights. I'm going to try it there for sure. And even if you don't get both effects, if you just get, hey, by going to attack phase, I hit something for 7 or I draw a card, sounds pretty good. It doesn't cost you anything either. Yeah, they're going to see your hand, but it's not like you have to discard them afterwards. Like, this card seems really strong, possibly even bordering on unfair if you were getting both effects every turn.
Yeah, this card, you can run away with the game so fast playing this card. If you're playing like a mid-range mirror and your opponent has a target and you just play this, they don't mod it or whatever, you reveal some like you get both effects. You draw one, kill their 7K, and they must kill it, or it just keeps happening. I played a handful of games with Waterfire Knights and yesterday, and it's just like between Gawain, Steiner, this card, and Furion, and just like having a naturally high hand size because of the way like Gawain and stuff works. I was just always able to get whatever mode that I wanted. It was just never an issue, and so I think I probably drew in most games. I would say at least 5 cards with this, like over the course of the game. It's like it's so easy. I think this card is. I thought Furion, who we'll talk about in a second, was like the best water fire card that we've ever seen. I think this card might be better than Furion. It's really really good. I really quite like this card.
Yeah, it's super strong. Well, let's come down from her a little bit then with Jack, who at first I thought, oh, they printed a second Braskas because he's kind of in his Braskas form, but no, he's just Jack. And this card is like so comparatively, it feels like the Laguna, like it's a common, it's so criminally underpowered. I don't understand why he has to pay a fire and a water to get haste First Strike Brave. Well, haste is only relevant the turn he comes in. Like it feels like it should have been an entry. The turn he comes in, haste First Strike Brave, because even then I don't think you'd play him because he ultimately amounts to, okay, well, you get one like free attack. And even the Ject Beam, like, I don't know, 8,000 just doesn't feel incredible. Yeah, you can use it in combination with the Brave, but to take advantage of this guy, you have to pay for and then pay another, like, I don't know, he seems surprisingly underpowered.
Yeah, I think that this card is pack filler. I think that the only good thing about this card is that there's only 3 Jeks that had the water element before. So when you played Guardians, if you wanted more than 3 Jeks, you had to play off-color cards, which isn't a big deal when you think about it because you just discard it when it's off-color. But sometimes you need water CP, and so there's like very very small niche situations where this card is technically better than playing a fire Jek in your deck. But either way, it's only getting discarded. So, yeah.
All right, so this is the last of the multi-elements, technically the last of the base set of Opus 18. This is Furion, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this because when this card first came out, I put it in my one of my chats with one of my friends, and they actually have a secret little bet going on because one guy thought this was busted, best card ever. The other guy was like, nah, this is never going to see competitive play. It'll never see the top level of a tournament. And he said, if it does, I will eat the cardboard. I will buy a Furion and I'll eat the card. And we're like, okay. He's like, okay, I'm going to hold you to that. So if you have the 5 or more characters, he counts himself, not a huge requirement. He gets haste and he draws a card on attack. Fantastic. You can then discard, fire, water, get the buffs. My concern with this card is that because he's just a 5k, I'm thinking, well, what if they just again step an 8k in front of him? Okay, block with an 8k. So now you have to discard 2 cards just to keep him alive with that. And then I wonder, well, does that then kind of take away some of his value? I don't know. If he was if he was a 7k and you could discard a single card to make him 9, I think I'd be all over it. But I'm just a little concerned about the size of that body. Sounds like maybe you got to play with him a little bit. Tell me about Furion. Yeah. What camp does he fall in?
I think your friend is gonna eat some cardboard. That's what I think because I think this card is cracked.
Ooh,
like I said, I played a handful of games with Water Knights and. Arceala and Ramza were the best cards in the deck there. Well, and Gawain, I guess, but that's kind of it's an old card. But for new cards, Ramza and Arceala were the best cards in the deck. But this card is like competing with those cards, like not even close to some of the other stuff that's happening in the game. I think right now it's the haste and immediately draw a card is so good. And I'm gonna blow your mind here real quick. If you discard a card that is both water and fire, you get plus 4k. So when you have all of these water fire cards in your deck, and a lot of them like Steiner are mostly just discard fodder. Like you don't actually play Steiner to the board very often. It's actually just really good because your opponent is just like, well, I can never block this card. So it's to me when I read the card. I think a lot of people would say, like, well, you have to attack with it, so it makes it difficult to block with, or, like, your opponent can kill it on the stack or whatever. And, like, for me, my opponent can do whatever they want, and I'm going to win. Like, that's what it feels like. It's like, no matter what you do, what you try to do, unless it's just, like, Odin or, like, a 2CP break, I will always be able to combat check out of it, is what it feels like. It'll get... first strike, so your blocking doesn't matter, or if you hit it with something that says like, "Hey, kill a dull thing," it's like, okay, well, I'll just discard a wire card and it activates. Yeah, it's not like, it feels so strong to me. I've been so impressed with this. I mean, the only downside with this card is you have to hit your opponent with it, which means that it's not going to be good against like damage decks or like Soiree and stuff like that. I think that's why I think RCL is a stronger card overall, is because you can just like go to your attack phase, draw a card. I'm not gonna attack, just pass. You know, just like wait and go. Where Fearon has to attack to get that trigger. That's the only thing that I think makes this card worse than
those bursts can be brutal. Yeah. Well, Steve, sounds like we might be buying some cardboard for you then if Jared is right. All right, folks, those were the base cards. We're going to touch on the starters really quick, retainers. Unfortunately, these came out so late in the States, I didn't really just get a chance to experiment with them. And honestly, by the time they got like loaded online and everything too, Opus 18 was upon us. But it sounds like Jared has some experience. We'll just talk about them as a group. Jared, tell me about the retainers first.
Yeah, so the first big retainer deck that came out on the competitive scene, and you know, there hasn't been a lot, obviously, but the first big deck that did come out was Wind, Earth, like Storm with the retainers. So it's just like take the mono Wind, take out your worst 15 cards, put in the retainer package, and put in Tilica and Shantoto and, you know, Earth summons like Kusith and stuff like that. Things that you're happy to have anyways. And basically you turn Tilica sideways, and then all of your retainers are costing like 1 now because Gladiolus becomes 1. Prompto becomes 1. You don't actually play the Ignis in the deck because it just doesn't offer enough. And you just use the Noctis effect as a way to not die. So you just don't want to die, and then you can kind of get some cheap cast in with the Noctis, search a card. So it's like a pseudo 1 CP card. And then the Prompto and the Gladiolus, once the Noctis is out, is also a pseudo 1 CP card. They help you kill your opponent's board. They help you deal damage. And that's kind of where that deck has been. Very, very strong. If you are looking for wind that has defensive options, this deck is probably where you want to be. It's very, very good at that. Tilica gives the deck, gives casting strategies so much room to play utility cards.
Yeah.
That it just kind of smooths everything out for you. The retainer package has been great. Retainer package outside of the casting strategies, it's been kind of average. Like Noctis is really good, but there's way more room for counterplay when you don't have an inevitability, you know, when you're not like drawing a bunch of cards with Luso or like getting a bunch of free stuff with Bismarck, you know, you can deal with one Noctis. What I think where Noctis is really meant to shine is to kind of support other main strategies rather than be the main strategy himself.
Yeah.
Those are my thoughts on retainers. In terms of the Arden cards, Arden's been pretty bad from everything that I've seen. I tried like one game with the card and I was like, I'm not feeling it. Like I just don't want to play. Like I want to play Noctis. This card is so much cooler. Yeah. Like, you know, it feels so much better. And you know, I've not seen anything that kind of like pushes me any other direction. I know like Richie put in a lot of time with the card. I had some players on my team who put in a lot of time with the card, and they're just like, this card sucks. Like it's just not very good. So I will say the one really good thing to come out of that side of the deck, or the two, I would say. Aranea, great card for Dragoons.
Yeah.
Solid card in general. Just a very solid lightning card. I'm not sure if he'll play in like, you know, mono lightning or whatever, but it is useful. Great King of Burmecia target as well.
Yeah. And
Yedalus is just kind of a solid, if not weird card. It plays a 4 CP fire forward from your break zone.
Yeah.
So that brings out Magisa, so there's some kind of like Magisa strategies there. I'm not sure if it is really great in that deck, but where it's really, really good is the Monofire Luso deck. So that deck doesn't really tend to play any backups, but it plays a ton of like just things that you want to have in your break zone, and like, you know, you want to flip really valuable cards. So Yedalus is actually really, really good because if you do flip that, you know, you get a backup and a forward back from your break zone. It's a pretty big tempo swing, so it is quite good in that deck.
Awesome. No, that's fantastic. Well, folks, that'll cover everything for Opus 18, Resurgence of Power. We're just going to wrap up here. I won't do any closing thoughts since we've talked for so long on these and we had so many multi-elements. I hope you enjoy the Opus. I want to thank Jared for joining me. I always really appreciate your insights. It's nice to get... I don't get a lot of the Japanese news over here, so it's always nice to hear some of the decks going on there. Tell me in the comments below what's your favorite card, what like tribal or set are you most looking forward to trying out. I'm definitely a little higher on this set, at least initially, than like some of the crystal ones, because the crystals were just kind of wonky. And I said to Jared too off screen that there's not a lot of fodder in this, in the sense that like a lot of the sets had, hey, here's this standard unit cycle, here's this cycle, here's this cycle, and so like 4 types of cards were just all the same. This one does feel like it has more variety to it. Maybe that's the multi-elements, who knows. So looking forward to it. If you like what you see here, feel free to like and subscribe. And I do have a Patreon down below if you feel inclined to donate. It's very much appreciated. Other than that, thanks again to Mysidia Gaming. Thanks to everyone who did such a great job getting this Opus out on time, ready to play. Can't wait to see what comes out of it. Jared, any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, this is I think you nailed it. This is a great set. You know, I think this is like the best set that we've had since like Opus 12, probably. Yeah. That's kind of what it feels like. It feels like the first one of the cycle is always the strongest, so we're getting a new set of multi-elements, and so I think this is probably maybe the strongest that we're going to have for a little while, but yeah, great. Totally great set. I'm really looking forward to play it.
Awesome. Check Jared out on FFTCG Crystarium. He does some writings for there, along with some other fine fellows. Until then, enjoy Opus 18. We appreciate you, and I'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.